Hello, this is Alejandra Acosta, and today we will be talking about James Joyce's book, Dubliners. So, this is the structure of the presentation that we are going to follow today. So, let's start. So, the thesis statement for this work is the following one. The Marxist perspective offers the possibility to make a cultural study of James Joyce's book, Dubliners, in order to analyze the depiction of the Irish low and middle classes in the first years of the 20th century. Let's talk about the author. So, the writer of Dubliners was James Augustine Joyce, who was born in Dublin on the 2nd of February in 1882. He was an Irish novelist, short story writer, poet, teacher, and literary critic. He contributed to the modernist avant garde movement and is regarded as one of the most influential and important writers of the 20th century. Now, we would have to say that he was born into a middle class family. They were Catholic. So, when he was at school, he attended the Jesuit schools Clongowes and the Belvedere. So, basically, even though they were like a really chaotic family because of the behavior and finances of his father. We could say that he was a brilliant student and somehow he made it out in order to go to university. The university was the University College Dublin. Then in 1898, Joyce began studying modern languages at the Royal University, which is now the University College at Dublin, the one that I mentioned before. And during this time at the university, Joyce published several papers on literature, history, and politics. So, it is really interesting because Joyce registered to study medicine at the Royal University, and then he decided to leave Dublin to start studying at the medical school in Paris. However, in his time in Paris, he spent the days reading philosophy or literature rather than learning about medicine. So we would have to say that 1904 was a significant year for Joyce because then he began to work on his short story collection, Dubliners, and on another story, which is Stephen Hero. This is like a semi biographical novel. So that would be it about his life. Okay, now about the book, we would have to say that Dubliners is a collection of 15 short stories that were published in 1914. And the short stories comprise a naturalistic depiction of the Irish middle class life, in Dublin around the early years of the 20th century. Time to talk about the literary lenses. So, the literary lenses that I have chosen in order to analyze this piece, it is the Marxist literary criticism. I have chosen this one because it follows two main ideas. The first one, it is not the conscience of man that determines their behavior, but social behavior that determines their conscience. And all mental systems are products of economic and social existence. Talking about the work itself, we would have to say that these stories center on Joyce's idea of an epiphany. It means that in every single story, there is a moment in which the character experiences a life changing or self understanding or illuminating moment. And actually, this is really interesting because we can see it in every single kind of characters. The voice called from one end of the gallery that the light was out. The upper part of the hall was now completely dark. Gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger. Now we have the depiction of reality. So, as I was telling you before with the literary lenses, in here we can see some characteristics of this book in which we can see that it is the society or sometimes the relation with it, the one that determines the behavior, the thoughts, and all that is related to the characters in the stories. So in first place, we have the routine. We have these kind of restrictive routines, and the repetitive, mundane details of everyday life mark life's choices Dubliners and trap them in circles of frustration, restraint, and violence. Actually, we can say that the routine affects characters who face difficult predicaments, but it also affects characters who have little open conflict in their lives. So, as an example of this, we have this fragment from one of the stories, which is called Evelyn. She is a young woman that has been, let's say, somehow violented by her father. So we have this. Consented to go away, to leave her home. Was that wise? She tried to weigh each side of the question. But in her new home, in a distant unknown country, it wouldn't be like that. Then she would be married. She, Evelyn. People would treat her with respect then. She wouldn't be treated as her mother had been. Even now, though she was over 19, she sometimes felt herself in danger of her father's violence. In this fragment, we can see how Evelyn just wants really bad to leave her home, even though she hasn't decided yet if that is the wisest option. She somehow wants to live that life that she has been having for such a long time. So, well, it is supposed that the characters in Dubliners are citizens of the Irish capital, but many of them want to escape and have an adventure in their own context or in their own stories, but different from that, some from what they knew. So we have to say that such longings, however, are never actually realized by the story's protagonists, more often than offering a literal escape from a physical place, like their homes or the schools or something like that. The stories tell of opportunities to escape from smaller, more personal restraints. So once again, in the story of Evelyn, for example, we can see how she seeks release from her domestic duties through marriage. Now we will have to talk about realism. So in this case, we are going to take into account the special mentions of public places, streets, and schools that we can read of all along the story. So for this, I have chosen this fragment, which is from An Encounter, one of the first stories in which the protagonist is a kid. So we have this one. It was a mild sunny morning in the first week of June. I sat up on the coping of the bridge, admiring the frail canvas shoes in which I had diligently pipe-clayed overnight, and watching the docile horses pulling a tramload of business people up the hill. We walked along the North Strand Road till we came to Vitriol Works, and then turned to the right along the Wharf Road. Mahoney began to play the Indians as soon as we were out of public sight. Another key factor that we have and that I mentioned before about James Joyce's life is the Catholicism. So in every single story of this book, we have the mention of Catholicism somehow. It could be a member from the church, it could be a death related from the of a member from the church, it could be a picture related to any of them. And at last we have darkness, which is a constant symbol in every story of the book. In some stories it could be reflected as death, which, death actually is also a constant in all the stories. There is always a mention of death, for example, dead family members, or one of the principal characters dies in the story. So this is really interesting as well. But the point is that this darkness could also be described as fog or winter. So we have these really sad, let's say, landscapes in which it is always being presented like that way. I mean, like in the main ideas of the stories, we have this darkness somehow represented. Now let's go to the conclusion. So, making a sociocultural analysis of James Joyce's work, Dubliners, we can see how through naturalism and realism, the author depicts the Irish society in the beginnings of the 20th century, showing that somehow these people were slaves from routine and showed this big Catholic influence that was given not only in the streets of Dublin, but in his personal life. In addition to that, this society is shown as a personal and social encounter with darkness. It is as if the author wanted to show that somehow every person in Dublin, it can be a child, a young person, all the other ones, are being followed by a phantom. And well, thank you so much for your attention. That would be all.